Hey YNR fans! Waving hand, welcome to YNR Trends, your go-to spot for the juiciest Young and the Restless updates, shocking spoilers, and all the drama you can't stop talking about. From surprise returns to scandalous twists, we break it all down for you, every day. So grab your coffee, hit that subscribe button, and let's dive right into Genoa City's hottest gossip. According to the Young and the Restless spoilers for the week of August 18th to 22nd, Kyle Abbott will compete with Audra Charles for Claire Newman's affections, and Audra Charles will play the blame game. Here is what fans should expect from Billy Abbott's Outburst as well. Nate Hastings will suspect Audra of lying, even if she tries to reassure him that nothing suspicious is happening. When Claire goes to Nate later with all of her unsavory Audra news, she should make sure of that. Claire will most likely boast to Nate about witnessing Audra kissing Kyle after she gives him an update on Audra's breakup plan for Victor Newman. Nate needs to know that Audra has been putting a lot of effort into her obvious manipulation scheme. Nate won't accept Audra's attempt to shift the responsibility and make Kyle the true problem. Since he will force her to tell the truth and won't want her to omit any information, Audra and Nate are about to have a huge argument. Holden Novak will find it difficult to stop thinking about Claire. Holden will do his hardest to suppress the sensations that are rising, but he will undoubtedly find himself drawn to Claire and unsure of how to handle it. If Claire learns of all the boundaries Kyle breached in an attempt to expose Audra and Nice, he may face competition for her affections. According to other YNR teasers, Kane will receive some counsel from Phyllis Summers that he didn't request but that might be helpful. Kane might hear Phyllis's advice about the Newmans and how it might be beneficial to align with them for the time being. Billy will argue with Adam Newman and Chelsea Lawson, while Daniel Romalotti Jr. is more attracted to Tessa Porter. Billy might get upset with Chelsea and Adam for tarnishing his reputation at Newman Media once more since they will be probed. He will give Kyle some romantic advice after he returns to Jack, while Kane discusses the specifics of Phyllis's new task. Will Kane fully benefit from Phyllis's hacking skills as they intended? According to previews for The Young and the Restless, Victor is going to make a shocking choice that will rock Genoa City, so Kane better be ready. Since he felt he had finally found his position in both business and love, Kyle had been moving around with a quiet confidence. He believed that the foundation was solid and that he could manage his duties at Jabot while clinging to the shaky relationships in his personal life. However, Genoa City had a way of surprising even the most confident people, and Kyle was about to learn that he wasn't the only one vying for acceptance and love. His composed demeanor concealed a sense of unease, particularly when he began to hear stories that someone else was attracting attention and was intent on taking the place Kyle believed was rightfully his. In his world, competition was nothing new, yet this seemed different. This was about more than simply business, it was about love, family, and the kind of approval that no corporate title could offer. As Kyle was attempting to regain his composure, Billy's outburst caused everyone to pause and pay attention, plunging Kyle into an unexpected tempest. Billy was known for his infamous outbursts, but this one was unique since it was raw, emotional, and bruising rather than driven solely by ego or business. Billy had a way of plucking at the scabs until the old wounds resurfaced, even though the Abbott family had seen its fair share of fractures. Billy's remarks, which were riddled with resentment and half-truths, came like arrows in a room full of sharp tension, making Kyle feel small despite his best efforts to appear large. There was a sneer in Billy's voice that implied Kyle didn't deserve his position and that he was living off of someone else's legacy instead of creating his own. Its sting was more intense than Kyle had anticipated. He was able to cope with the arguments in the business boardroom, the subtle jabs from competitors, and even the doubts of shareholders, but this was family, and family had the ability to hurt in ways that strangers could never. For Kyle, the significance of Billy's public scolding was just as much of a burden as the humiliation. Everyone in the room turned to witness his reaction. Would he push back, demonstrating for good that he wasn't just a name riding on his father's fame, or would he back down, as Billy appeared to want? After Billy's voice died, there was an almost intolerable hush that was laden with curiosity, expectation, and judgment. Kyle's throat constricted, and he briefly contemplated saying nothing at all. However, he understood that being silent would only support Billy's story, and Kyle wasn't going to allow that to occur. He reminded Billy that although legacies could open doors, it was grit and decisions that prevented them from slamming shut. His voice was steady but tinged with fire, and his jaw tightened. But beneath Kyle's audacious remarks lay a shuddering skepticism. He was aware that Billy's tirade was about more than just him. It was about the ongoing struggle for Jack's favor, the unstated contest to see who could best represent the Abbott family in a meaningful way. Billy's rage exposed his own fears, but it didn't make it any simpler to ignore. Long after the incident was over, Kyle couldn't shake the feeling that his position wasn't as safe as he would have liked to think because the comments continued to reverberate in his chest. He and Billy's long-standing animosity was intensifying rather than diminishing, and as a result, new players were joining the game. The gripping story of Kyle's Got Competition, Billy's Outburst examines themes of rivalry, personal development, and emotional upheaval. Kyle and Billy, two characters whose interactions propel the tale along and unveil more nuanced aspects of their motivations and personalities, are at the center of the narrative. Billy's outburst, which acts as a catalyst for transformation and forces both characters to face their fears, goals, and the nature of their relationship, is the main source of tension. This study explores the complexities of their competition, the psychological causes of Billy's tantrum, and the conflict's wider effects on both their own growth and the society in which they live. The novel is really a study of competitiveness and how it influences people's actions. Whether in a social, academic, or professional setting, Kyle is shown as a person who has long occupied a position of authority or respect in his surroundings. He is admired for his self-assurance and accomplishments, but he is also a target for many who feel he takes center stage. The underdog, Billy, on the other hand, is a guy whose annoyances have been building inside of him until they ultimately explode in a dramatic outburst. This outburst is a sign of underlying emotions of inadequacy, envy, and a desperate need for approval rather than just being an act of rage. The two characters are at odds not only over superiority but also over identity and validation, which their conflict symbolizes. A turning point for both characters, Billy's outburst is a crucial part of the story. Billy might have been repressing his feelings up until this point in an effort to live up to the expectations that were put on him or to Kyle's apparent superiority. But the explosion exposes the flaws in this facade and his unadulterated feelings. This moment is important because it makes Kyle reevaluate where he stands. He might have taken his own superiority for granted or failed to recognize the effect his success had on Billy. Any sense of stability is destroyed by the eruption, which forces both characters to reflect and reassess their lives. Billy views the outburst as both a release and a reckoning. It frees him from the weight of suppressed emotions but also compels him to face the repercussions of his behavior. It is worthwhile to investigate Billy's outburst's psychological aspects in greater detail. Billy's anger is an example of a secondary emotion that frequently covers over more intense emotions like hurt, fear, or frustration. Billy's outburst in this instance is probably the result of neglect or a sense of unfairness. He might believe that Kyle's success has come at his expense or that his efforts have gone unappreciated. Whether true or not, this impression feeds his emotional reaction. Another way to interpret the outburst is as a call for assistance, a last-ditch effort to make his presence known and demand recognition. Psychologically speaking, these outbursts are frequently caused by ongoing stress or a sense of helplessness. Billy's lack of coping strategies, which could be a result of his upbringing, past experiences, or working environment, is indicated by his inability to communicate his feelings in a better way. Kyle's response to Billy's tirade is just as instructive. Billy's sense of exclusion is increased if Kyle reacts defensively or dismissively, which furthers their power disparity. However, if Kyle demonstrates empathy or makes an effort to comprehend Billy's viewpoint, it may pave the way for future reconciliation and development. This situation puts Kyle's character to the test. Will he embrace his supremacy and continue the rivalry, or will he rise above the dispute and use it as a chance for personal growth? Many things about Kyle's personal weaknesses and talents are revealed by the way he responds to Billy's outburst. Despite his seeming self-assurance, Kyle might be hiding his own fears, and Billy's outburst could be a mirror reflecting parts of him that he doesn't want to face. Their quarrel has wider ramifications than just their interpersonal relationships. A business, sports team, or school where competition is a motivating factor could be the setting for the story. Rivalry can be both a motivating and destructive factor in these kinds of settings. Healthy competition encourages people to perform well, but when it turns poisonous, it causes animosity, burnout, and strained bonds between people. The story might be making a statement about the competitive mentality of contemporary society, where achievement is frequently evaluated by comparison to others rather than by personal satisfaction. Billy's tantrum can be interpreted as a criticism of structures that set people against one another, producing winners and losers instead of encouraging cooperation and development. Another crucial element of the narrative is what happens after Billy's outburst. What are the responses of the other characters? Do they support Kyle or do they feel sorry for Billy? The group's connections and hierarchy are made clear by the social processes at work here. Billy's loneliness in his role and the challenge of questioning the established quo are highlighted if he is secluded after his outburst. On the other hand, it indicates a common annoyance with Kyle's authority or an understanding that something needs to change if people support him. The consequences of the outburst also determine what will happen next. Will Billy be shunned or will his behavior encourage others to speak up? Will Kyle try to mend the rift between them, or will he escalate his actions? The story may also examine themes of forgiveness and redemption. Both characters may benefit from the experience once the first shock of the outburst wears off. Billy might grow to regret what he did, realizing that although his outburst was cathartic, it might have harmed his reputation or relationships. He might look for more positive ways to express himself in the future as a result of this insight. If Kyle decides to listen to Billy's worries, he might develop a fresh understanding of his own actions and how they affect other people. Despite being unpleasant, the disagreement may serve as a springboard for their mutual development and better communication. In the end, the narrative can imply that rivalry need not be a zero-sum game and that both characters might achieve success without jeopardizing one another. The reader's interpretation is also greatly influenced by the story's tone and setting. The rivalry between Kyle and Billy is heightened if the story takes place in a high-stakes setting, such a competitive office or a sporting stadium. The dramatic and tight tone may convey the emotional turbulence of their exchanges. The tone may be more muted, highlighting the psychological depth of the character's dilemma, if the plot is more introspective and centers on their internal conflicts. The reader's perception of the outburst and its ramifications is further influenced by the author's choice of perspective, including whether the event is recounted from Kyle's, Billy's, or an impartial third-person point of view. Billy's thoughts and feelings would be intimately revealed in a first-person account, which would help to justify or make sense of his outburst. On the other hand, a third-person omniscient narrator might present a more impartial viewpoint, enabling the reader to observe both sides of the dispute. The story's themes can also be strengthened by the use of imagery and symbolism. For example, Billy's outburst can reflect the emotional storm inside of him if it happens during a storm or another period of natural turmoil. In a similar vein, Kyle's elevated status in contrast to Billy's perceived inferiority may be reinforced if he is regularly linked to images of height or light, such as being on a podium or being in the spotlight. The competitive aspect of their relationship may be further highlighted by the use of analogies, such as comparing their rivalry to a fight or a game. These literary techniques enhance the reader's experience and deepen the examination of the main issues by giving the story additional levels of significance. Kyle's Got Competition, Billy's Outburst is a noteworthy title in and of itself. It implies that Billy's outburst poses a fresh threat to Kyle, who may have remained uncontested up to this point. The word competition suggests that Kyle's formerly uncontested position has been upset by Billy's actions, adding an element of uncertainty. Although the title Billy's Outburst casts Billy as the catalyst for this transformation, it is unclear whether Billy is indeed a rival or whether his outburst is a sign of a more serious problem. Although conflict is hinted at in the title, the character of that conflict and how it is resolved are left up to the story. To sum up, Kyle's Got Competition, Billy's Outburst explores the intricacies of interpersonal relationships, rivalry, and emotional expression in a deep and complicated way. The story examines how power relations, insecurity, and unfulfilled wants can result in explosive conflicts through the competition between Kyle and Billy. Billy's tantrum marks a sea change, forcing both characters to face their shortcomings and reevaluate how they handle rivalry and conflict. Since many people have gone through comparable experiences of rivalry, frustration, or the yearning for recognition, the story's examination of these topics strikes a universal chord. The story provides important insights on the human condition and how we manage our relationships with others, regardless of whether it ends up being about reconciliation or ongoing conflict. This is an engaging and thought-provoking narrative because of the richness of character development, the psychological realism of their interactions, and the wider social criticism.